Welcome to Hidden Dread, Part 1, The Arrival. Deep within the Appalachian Mountains, there are secrets older than memory. The ridges and valleys stretch on for miles, covering the land like a heavy green blanket. Tourists see beauty, hikers see challenge, but the locals, they whisper something different. They whisper warnings. And they never go alone into certain places once the sun begins to set. This story is one of those warnings. Daniel Reeves was 27, a strong and adventurous young man with a love for the outdoors. His friends described him as fearless, the kind of guy who thrived on pushing himself beyond limits. And when he announced his plan to hike deep into a remote stretch of the Appalachian Trail, nobody could talk him out of it. To Daniel, it wasn't just about hiking. It was about proving something to himself, about capturing the raw beauty of nature on film. He brought along his small handheld camera, a survival kit, and a single tent. He believed that would be enough. The first day began with excitement. Daniel parked his car near a trailhead that few people used, the kind that was more rumor than map. He documented everything. The endless trees, the calls of birds, the way the morning sunlight filtered through the mist. His voice on the recording was full of confidence. He didn't believe in superstition. He didn't believe in legends. He thought the Appalachian Mountains were just trees and dirt and silence. But the deeper he walked, the more that silence began to feel unnatural. By mid-afternoon, Daniel noticed how empty the wood seemed. No birds called out anymore. The air grew still, thick with humidity that clung to his skin. The trail narrowed, almost vanishing, forcing him to push through underbrush that scratched at his legs. The sun was high, but beneath the trees it felt like dusk. Daniel laughed nervously into his camera, saying, "Guess I picked the creepy route." Yet in his eyes, there was already unease. That evening, he found a small clearing and set up his tent. The clearing looked safe enough. Flat ground, just enough space to build a small fire. As night fell, Daniel recorded again. His voice carried a nervous energy as he described the forest around him. "It's quiet, like really quiet. I haven't seen another hiker all day. I thought this trail would connect with others, but it feels like I'm walking into the middle of nowhere." He chuckled, but the laughter didn't sound natural. It sounded forced. As he tried to sleep, the silence pressed down on him like a weight. Then came the sound that woke him, faint movement outside his tent. At first, he thought it was just an animal. He lay still, listening. The sound grew clearer. Not scurrying, not rustling. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the tent. Daniel held his breath, his hand tight on the handle of his pocket knife. The steps paused. For nearly a minute, there was nothing but silence. Then, without warning, a branch snapped just a few feet away. He whispered to his camera, his voice trembling for the first time, "I think someone's out there." With shaky hands, he pulled the zipper of the tent open, peering into the darkness. The beam of his flashlight cut across the trees, but there was nothing. No figure, no movement, just the oppressive weight of the forest watching him. He stayed awake the entire night, knife in hand, light flickering across the endless black. Morning brought little relief. He convinced himself it was his imagination, maybe a deer or a stray hiker who wandered too close. He packed up, strapped his bag, and pushed further into the wilderness. But he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every sound, a branch cracking, leaves shifting in the wind, felt deliberate. At one point, he swore he saw a shadow dart between the trees. Yet when he looked again, nothing was there. By the second evening, Daniel's voice on the recordings had changed. The confidence was gone. His tone was lower, quicker, like a man trying to reassure himself. He said, "I haven't passed anyone in almost 2 days. Not a single hiker, not even a campsite. That doesn't make sense. Even the remotest trail should have some sign of people. But it feels like I'm completely alone here." He paused, then added in a whisper, "Alone, except for whatever's following me." He didn't mean to say it out loud. It slipped out like a thought he was trying to bury. But once spoken, it could not be ignored. That night, the footsteps returned. This time, they came earlier, just after sunset. He hadn't even zipped his tent closed before he heard them again, circling, deliberate, heavy. Daniel sat in silence, his camera propped in the corner, recording every second. The microphone caught the crunch of leaves, the subtle drag of something brushing the tent fabric, and his rapid breathing as he whispered, "It's not an animal. I know it's not an animal." Hours passed. The sound would fade, then return, closer each time. Once, he thought he saw the shadow of a hand pressing against the tent wall. His scream echoed into the night, but when he flung the tent open, the forest was empty. Not a soul, not a figure, only trees and silence. The camera caught his trembling hands, the frantic swing of his flashlight, the panic in his eyes. He begged the forest, "What do you want?" His voice cracked, but the woods gave no answer. Dawn finally came, and with it, a decision. Daniel decided to cut the trip short. He had come for beauty, for adventure, but he found something else, something that wanted him to know he was not welcome. His plan was simple: hike back the way he came, reach the trailhead, and leave. Yet as he began his return, he realized something horrifying. The trail was gone. Where there had once been a narrow path winding between the trees, there was now only thick underbrush, dense and unbroken. He checked his GPS, but the signal flickered, refusing to lock. His compass spun wildly, pointing nowhere. Every landmark he thought he recognized looked different now. And then, on the ground, he saw it. Footprints. Not his. Larger, deeper, pressed into the date, leading deeper into the forest. His heart raced as he realized the truth. Whatever followed him hadn't been watching. It had been leading, drawing him deeper into the mountains, step by step. Daniel stared at the prints, fear gnawing at him. For the first time in his life, he admitted to himself that he might not make it back. He lifted the camera, his voice low, trembling. "If anyone finds this, I just want to say, I didn't get lost. I was led here." As the forest closed in around him, Daniel Reeves took one more step forward, following the prints into the darkness. And that was only the beginning. Part 2. The Stalker in the Woods. The forest was no longer a place of beauty. It had turned into a labyrinth, twisting and shifting around Daniel Reeves with every step. The trail he thought he knew had vanished, and in its place was a suffocating wilderness that seemed to move with intention. By morning, his nerves were frayed, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He had planned for 3 days in the mountains. By the second night, survival, not exploration, was the only thought left in his mind. The camera he carried was no longer a tool for documenting his adventure. It became his lifeline, the only proof that what he was experiencing was real. His voice on the recording trembled as he whispered, "Something is following me. It doesn't want me to leave." His words lingered in the air like a confession, each syllable thick with dread. The day dragged on slowly. The sun should have cut through the canopy, but the forest stayed cloaked in the dim light, as though twilight had settled early and refused to leave. At one point, Daniel stopped to drink from a stream. Crouching low, the cold water soothing his cracked lips. That's when he saw them, prints in the mud on the opposite bank. Large, deep, and uneven, as if made by something with a twisted gait. They weren't animal tracks, and they were far too large to be human. The prints didn't move away from the stream. They led directly toward where he was kneeling. His stomach dropped. His camera caught the sound of his breath hitching, the frantic shuffle as he scrambled backward. He swung his flashlight even though it was daylight. Nothing. The woods remained still. But he knew, without a doubt, that something had been standing right there, watching. Hours later, Daniel stumbled upon the cabin. Hidden deep in the woods, its roof sagged under years of neglect, windows shattered like jagged teeth, the door crooked on its hinges. At first, relief washed over him, shelter, maybe even supplies. But as he stepped inside, unease crawled up his spine. The air smelled of rotten, damp wood. Dust covered the floor, but in the corner sat a lantern that had been used recently. The wick was blackened, the metal warm to the touch, as if someone had lit it not long before. Daniel whispered to the camera, "Someone's been here, someone's still here." He turned, and the beam of his flashlight revealed something carved into the wall. Long, jagged marks gouged deep into the wood. Not scratches from an animal. These marks were purposeful. They were symbols, crude shapes overlapping each other, spirals and slashes that made his eyes ache the longer he stared. His voice shook as he said, "I don't think I should be in here." Night fell quickly, swallowing the cabin in darkness. Daniel barricaded the door with a broken chair, though deep down, he knew wooden nails would never keep whatever hunted him away. He huddled in the corner, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, the camera propped up to catch everything. Then the sounds began. First, the familiar crunch of footsteps circling the cabin. Then, the drag, something heavy scraping across the dirt outside. The sound was rhythmic, almost deliberate, like claws tracing the earth. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Daniel froze, his flashlight trembling in his grip. A low, guttural breathing followed, the kind that rattled through the silence like a growl restrained. The door rattled once. Then again, the chair creaked under pressure. Daniel gasped, covering his mouth to silence himself, eyes wide with terror. But the door never opened. Instead, the sound moved slowly around the cabin, circling again and again, the dragging noise following close behind. Hours passed this way, the noises never leaving, until finally, silence. At dawn, Daniel dared to open the door. The ground outside was torn apart with long grooves, as if massive claws had dug into the earth. They led away into the forest, vanishing into the fog. His camera caught his broken voice. "This isn't human. God help me, it's not human." He left the cabin behind, stumbling through the trees, no longer caring about direction. Every branch snapped like a gunshot. Every gust of wind felt like breath on his neck. He stopped at one point, leaning against a tree, whispering, "I can feel it. It's waiting for me to rest, waiting for me to stop running." As the sun dipped low again, the forest grew even darker. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, bending in ways that defied the light. Daniel muttered into the camera, "The woods, they are not right. They are bending, changing. It's not just something out here, it's the entire forest. That night, he tried to find shelter in a rocky outcrop. He wedged himself between two massive boulders, thinking the tight space would keep him hidden. For hours, all was still. Then, slowly, the sounds returned. Not footsteps this time, something heavier. The groan of branches cracking under weight, the crunch of leaves crushed by something massive. His flashlight flickered, and for just a moment, the beam caught it. A shape, impossibly tall, standing between the trees. Its limbs were long, unnaturally so, its body pale against the black woods. It didn't move. It didn't need to. Daniel's scream cut the silence, echoing through the forest, before he killed the light. He whispered in the darkness, "I saw it. God, I saw it." The recording ends with his ragged breathing, his sobs muffled by the weight of the mountain pressing down around him. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Something had found him, and it wasn't going to stop. Part 3. The Vanishing. By the third night, Daniel Reeves was barely recognizable. His eyes, once alive with a spark of adventure, had dulled into hollow, haunted pools. His clothes were torn, his skin pale from cold and exhaustion, and his voice, shaky, broken, spoke only in whispers. The Appalachian Mountains had stripped him of everything, his strength, his direction, and his hope. But what frightened him most wasn't the isolation. It was the knowledge that he wasn't alone. The camera caught his trembling hands as he adjusted it one last time. His words came out raw, choked with fear. "If this is found, if anyone sees this, don't come here. Don't follow me. The mountains don't want us here. They never did." The wind outside howled through the trees, carrying with it a sound he couldn't mistake anymore. It wasn't the groan of wood or the cry of an animal. It was a voice, low, drawn out, repeating his name. Daniel. The syllables dragged like claws on stone, echoing across the forest. His jaw locked as tears welled in his eyes. He staggered forward, clutching the camera like it was the only tether to his sanity. Every path he took twisted back on itself. No matter where he walked, he found the same clearing, the same bent tree with bark stripped down to raw wood. It was as if the forest had trapped him in a loop, an endless maze designed to break him down piece by piece. As night fell again, Daniel found an abandoned fire pit, the ashes still faintly warm. His heart sank. Someone, or something, else had been there only hours before. Around the pit were small wooden figures, crudely carved and arranged in a circle. Each figure had its head snapped off, the tiny decapitated pieces placed carefully in the date. He whispered to the camera, "This isn't just a creature. It's something older, something people here used to worship." The forest groaned with movement, branches swaying though no wind stirred. His flashlight flickered, and once again he heard the dragging. Louder this time. Closer. The sound of something enormous forcing its way between the trees. He pressed himself against the rock, holding his breath, until the light caught it again. A towering figure emerged, half hidden by the shadows. Its limbs were unnaturally long, bending in ways bones should never bend. Its head was nothing more than a featureless oval, pale and smooth. Yet Daniel swore he felt its eyes on him. The creature leaned, almost curiously, its body twisting as if to study him. Daniel snapped. His screams echoed through the woods as he sprinted into the night, branches clawing at his face, roots snagging his legs. His camera swung wildly, catching only glimpses, The pale arm stretching between trees, the outline of that faceless head, the way the forest itself seemed to bend around the entity. Hours blurred together. Daniel no longer spoke in full sentences. His recordings became fragmented. Gasps, prayers, curses whispered through sobs. At one point, he collapsed in a cave, his body shaking violently. The lens caught his lips forming words over and over. "It wants me. It won't stop until I'm gone." The cave should have been safe. It wasn't. As he lit a small fire, shadows twisted against the wall, stretching unnaturally high. They moved even when he was still. His voice cracked as he begged, "Please, please just let me go." The flame sputtered, then extinguished with a sudden gust, leaving him in absolute blackness. The next recording showed Daniel outside again, his face illuminated only by the camera's light. His cheeks were streaked with blood where he had clawed at his own skin. His voice was nearly gone, a rasp barely above a whisper. "It's not chasing me anymore," he said. "It doesn't have to. The forest is part of it. I'm already trapped." Branches creaked above him. He tilted the camera upward. Between the swaying treetops, something massive loomed, darker than the night sky. Not just one figure. Many, dozens. Shapes that hung in silence, stretching across the canopy like a congregation of giants. All faceless, all watching. Daniel fell to his knees, screaming until his voice broke, the sound torn from his chest. The ground itself seemed to vibrate, and the forest answered with a chorus of whispers, words in no human tongue. The recording blurred as the camera fell sideways, capturing Daniel being dragged backward by pale hands that slithered from the earth itself. His fingernails clawed trenches in the date, his mouth wide in a final, soundless scream. The last image was a lens filling with static, then silence. Weeks later, hikers stumbled upon the camera at the edge of the trailhead. No sign of Daniel was ever found. Authorities dismissed it as another tragic disappearance in the vast, unforgiving Appalachian wilderness. But locals, those who had heard the whispers and seen the carved symbols in the trees, knew better. They warned outsiders never to stray too far, because in the Appalachian Mountains, the forgotten things still live. And once they notice you, they never let you leave. The dread never sleeps. Subscribe to Hidden Dread.